Former juvenile court judge in Pennsylvania could face more than 10 years in prison after being convicted in a kids for cash scheme. Prosecutors say he used children as pawns, locking them up unjustly in a plot to get rich. Our Lindsay Davis has more.
You need to be. You remember me? Do you remember me? Do you remember my son? An all-star wrestler? He's gone.
This mother's rage and fury greeted former Judge Mark Ciavarella as he exited court Friday. Ciavarella sent Sandy Fonzo's son to juvenile detention for possession of drug paraphernalia. Years later, he killed himself. Prosecutors say Ciavarella was involved in a kids for cash scandal. He's accused of taking $1 million in exchange for putting juvenile defendants into private detention centers, though that's something he denies to this day.
Absolutely never took a dime to send a kid anywhere. If that was the case, that would have been in this trial.
In one reported case, he sentenced a child to 2 years for joyriding in his mom's car. Some of the kids he ordered locked up were as young as 10. In 2009, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court dismissed 4,000 cases Ciavarella handled, saying they had no confidence in his rulings. On Friday, he was found guilty of 12 of 39 charges, including racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy, but was not charged with extortion.
No, you know what he told everybody in court? They need to be held accountable for their actions. You need to be.
Ciavarella remains free at this time, but he's expected to get a minimum prison sentence of 12 years behind bars. Sandy Fonzo doesn't consider that justice. For Good Morning America, Lindsay Davis, ABC News.
Wow.
Welcome to Ford.
That's creepy, dude.
Hello everyone, welcome to Global Government News. Today is Wednesday, February 23rd, 2011, and I'm Darko. Welcome to the third part, the final part of this news bulletin. Thank you for joining me, and thank you for sticking with me here in this third part. We've been covering mostly the economy, and I'll cover some of the big stories that are in the mainstream news right now towards the end of this news video right here. You just watched that video of the cash for kids. I remember reading and hearing about that. Oh man, what was that, a year or 2 years ago almost now. But I guess he just totally denies it. But you know, to me, it's not a surprise, and it's not a surprise because I see courts as banks. They collect revenue, and that's what they do. And when people think that they're going to go there and get justice, most of the time they're going to be let down. And so that's why I promote stateless society. And I think people should be responsible and for themselves, and they should be liable for their actions. Unfortunately, in a government and with statism and that, you have the courts and all these courts, and they basically protect rich people, wealthy people, and they protect all of their crimes, all their fraud, all of their murder and theft and coercion that goes on. They protect them, and they protect the corporations. That's what the courts do, and they collect revenue for the state. So I just wanted to put that out there. This one that we have up next is in Greece. Babies are for sale on the black market in Greece. The trade in eggs and babies is flourishing as poor young women from Bulgaria and Romania are blackmailed into handing over infants. Perpetrators can often rely on accomplices within the local government. So it says here, Electrocautra in fighting to help foreign women get their children back. The young lawyer is convinced that criminal networks in Greece are blackmailing poor women from Bulgaria and Romania into selling their babies to childless couples. Kautra, who is representing a Romanian mother in court, says the Greek authorities have been slow to respond to the fight against the baby trade. So it says in January, Bulgarian and Greek police arrested 14 people over allegations that they trafficked newborn babies to Greece, according to Bulgarian Interior Minister. They said most of the babies were of Roma origin. And we'll move on to Britain's big society scheme backfires. The British Prime Minister has disclosed his plans to privatize all of UK's public sector. So there you go. It's what we talk about on these videos all the time, right? Which is eventually gutting out all the social programs, and now they're doing what I expected, which is to start cutting out all the whatever positive benefits there are from the state as far as having to be bound to that state, to be bound as a citizen to it, and whatever perks that you get as being a slave to the state, they're taking those away. They're taking the goodies away. And so now they're taking away collective bargaining rights for both government jobs, government unions, and private unions, and all the benefits that go with it. So, and as the countries, and basically they're not really countries or companies, you know, say the corporation of the United States, the corporation of the UK, they're pretty much insolvent, right? And they're just going for the last gold bars in the vault in Fort Knox, which there really isn't any gold there, but I'm just saying. The ultimate goal is the IMF is going to take over most countries as they indebt themselves, as the people that are, quote, leaders, our representatives, sell us down the river. Basically, as we go insolvent, we will be indebted and go into IMF receivership, which won't be fun. High interest rates, high taxes, and you know, of course, we'll go under the UN as well, even more. So we have climate change scientists call for food rationing to reduce carbon emissions, and then we move to this. Oh, food tax could trim some people's calorie intake. So would you still reach for those French fries if there was a price that was jacked up by a substantial tax? A study says not everybody would. And junk food taxes. So there you go, folks. And you know, as people are in other countries are starving, like in Korea and South America, and of course Africa, they're hungry, man. Even in parts of China, I mean, they're starving. And you know, here in the U.S., there's also people starving as well. And as we hand over hundreds of millions of dollars to places like Egypt and that, while you know people in Detroit are starving. We got this, and it just made me irate when I saw this. Food tax could trim some people's calorie intake. So, I mean, it's not that we already have a problem with rising food prices due to inflation and policies and actions carried out by the Federal Reserve System and the Treasury Department and the federal government overall. And yet they're going to try to raise prices even more. So it's just pure insanity, but it's not insanity. It's a very cold, calculated agenda, and unfortunately, we're all part of it. It says SEC charges 7 in global warming pump and dump scheme. So it's all a scheme, right? The whole global warming. It's all about what? The end goal, what is the agenda with this? It is to impose a carbon tax, a global carbon tax on every country, so that would basically be able to fund this world government. The Securities and Exchange Commission today charged a group of 7 individuals who perpetrated a fraudulent pump and dump scheme in the stock of a sham company that purported to provide products and services to fight global warming. So, and the SEC is, they themselves are corrupt, and they only do shakedowns when, well, they don't get their cut. So these company must not have gave them their cut. UN calls for the new era of social justice for all, with basic services and decent jobs. And of course, once the UN takes over, basically, it pretty much is. It's like a big beast machine that's just about to basically go operational, and it's just waiting on all the states, all the nation states to go under. And what the UN will promise is basic services. So you'll get your GMO plastic, rice made out of plastic, and that will sterilize you and kill you. And you get your fluoridated water, and you get your vaccines, and that's about all you get. You don't get any private property, no privacy or nothing. UN unveils vision for global green economy, so there you go, right? UN Monday unveiled a strategy to ensure a sustainable future for the planet by investing 2% of wealth generated by the global economy, or some $1.3 trillion annually, in 10 key sectors. So, I covered this already. A member that was on the board or on the chair of the IPCC basically said that, in quotes, I'll paraphrase this though, that the whole purpose of the carbon trade or cap and trade or carbon tax is to redistribute wealth. So it's communism, world communism, but it's a mix of communism and capitalism. That's what we're living in. And it all basically merged together after World War II, after the powers that be were experimenting senior WB official in city, and it says the vice president for sustainable development, keyword eugenics, sustainable development at the World Bank, the world government, is holding a series of meetings with state government officials to appraise herself of sustainable development projects in India. So, you know, always India is always big on eugenics too. And talking about horrible image, don't look at the horrible images from the austerity. And we have this police basically guarding, and we saw this in the video, the man on the coffin. I was wondering what that coffin was for. And then we have this dude, basically Molotov cocktails, police actually getting set on fire. There's a slow shot of it. And the Greeks don't mess around. I've said this in previous videos. The Greek people do not mess around when it comes to protesting and making their voice heard. The U.S., unfortunately, well, I said fortunately, they've been accustomed to having it pretty good, and here in the U.S. they're starting to feel the pinch, the squeeze, and they're starting to get out in the streets here in Indiana and Michigan and Wisconsin and Ohio. Detroit schools cuts plan approved. Sorry, the state of Michigan approved the plan for Detroit to close about half of its public schools and increase the average size of the high school. In other words, what? Mega schools. Why? Because you can easily manage them. You could just have cameras everywhere. You can have a fence around the whole thing. Oh, God, dude. Oh, man. Like I said, in the future, eventually they're going to have these huge re-education and indoctrination complexes. They'll call them mega schools or county schools. And you will, as a parent, you will get visitation rights to your children from the state to be able to see your children every weekend, and they will stay there all week. It says here, South Africa considers payroll tax, raising VAT tax or value-added tax for healthcare coverage. Keep moving. New Jersey has highest combined U.S. tax burden. And it says here, CBO, $2.8 trillion in defense spending by 2015. So see, it's going to keep the military-industrial complex and killing people and expanding the empire going while they're cutting all your benefits. Just like I said, retiring boomers find 401k plans fall short. Well, no surprise. Moody's downgrades Japan's debt rating. And we got here, that's because Japan just got knocked off behind China as what, the second leading, second biggest basically economy. It says here, and now there's 17 states where the public sector workers are protesting to keep their benefits. And it says here, we're going to go in here, Indiana, like I was telling you, and then we have Michigan, and then we have Iowa, protesters to protect collective bargaining rights. Oklahoma, protests the state legislator's pension reform plan. Nevada, public sector workers hold solidarity rallies across the street. West Virginia, workers demand raises and better safety standards. Talking about coal miners. Rhode Island, labor unions show support for Wisconsin protesters. California, solidarity rallies draw a huge crowd in Sacramento. In Texas, union members hold vigil to show their solidarity with protesters in Madison. So wow, teachers appalled by a governor who says if they don't like the pay, they should get another job. And then we're going to move on here. It says Koch Industries funneled $1.2 million to elect governors battling unions. Koch Industries Incorporated and its employees and subsidiaries spent $1.2 million in the last election, helping to elect Republican governors who are now trying to take away bargaining rights of state workers. Indiana Democrats stage boycott, and Indiana Democrats flee to Illinois and block labor bill. Then we have missing Democrats continue Wisconsin budget. Then we have 39% of Wisconsin public school 8th graders proficient in math. And then we have 2/3 of Wisconsin public school 8th graders can't read proficiently. Then we have the ghost towns of China. Amazing satellite images show cities meant to be home to the millions lying deserted. So why? Oh, don't worry, they're coming. Korean bank run. We already covered that. SEC's top lawyer Becker sued for inheriting Madoff's Ponzi scheme. So I told you, SEC, they're just as corrupt. U.S. drops criminal probe of former Countrywide chief. So no accountability, right? Corporations. It's called corporatism. From prison, Madoff says banks had to know a fraud. Fed's Honig says U.S. should break up largest financial firms. Too big to fail. Geithner says financial system is stronger than before the recession. New York City expands smoking ban to parks, beaches, everywhere, and eventually it will be illegal to smoke. in general. New Zealand declares national state of emergency. Quake shakes 30 million tons of ice off glacier. New Zealand earthquake death toll will rise, says PM Key. Chicago election results. I predicted this. Rahm Emanuel elected Chicago mayor. All rigged. It's a rigged game. The Fed will no longer recognize the Defense of Marriage Act. This is GGN, and I'm